Welcome to People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm your host, Curt Carlson. Joining me today is John Hadden. John was the guest in episodes 3 and 4 as well. As one of my best friends and one of my favorite people to talk to, I'll turn to John occasionally for a different type of conversation than what I might have with a first-time guest. We bounce some ideas and topics off each other, and I hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, please take a few moments to leave a rating and a review of People I Know Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you might be listening. You can search for and follow People I Know Show on Facebook and Instagram to see photos and other content related to the show. Now, on to today's conversation with John Hadden. I'd like to welcome John Hadden back to the program. Hi, John.
Well, hello.
You are a potentially long-term recurring guest on the program because occasionally I want to just talk about stuff. Not necessarily, we can learn more about you through this conversation, but not necessarily really dig deep into someone that I know. Talk about just stuff that I want to talk about with someone I like to talk to. So that's what we're going to do today, John.
All right. Well, it's good to know that I'm still one of the people that you know.
You are. You still are. Although I feel like I see you less now because I'm working on this podcast so much.
But it seems like it's going really well, so that's good.
Yeah.
You know, I was, your first few episodes?
You were early on.
And now you've got a lot. I haven't even been able to keep up. I'm a little behind, I'm sorry to say.
That's okay. When we recorded the first time, that turned into a 2-part episode because I was afraid that would be too long, partly, and I was also about to travel. And then since some episodes have gotten a lot longer.
Okay.
And you consume different sorts of media, some podcasts, different online things. And what's your thought on the length, whether it's a length of an article or a length of a podcast or whatever else you consume? Is if something's too long, is it daunting to you? Because I'm afraid to some people that might listen, they see a certain length of time. It's like, ooh, I can't invest the time on this.
It can be a little daunting, and so I will judge based on a per episode basis. Even, when I read a book, I'll look to see how long the chapter is before I start it to make sure that I have enough time. So if it's something that I really want to do, like continue to read my book or listen to your podcast, I'll eventually find that time. But if there's a certain long chapter, I might put it off for a little bit longer than I normally would have.
Yeah, and I remember with books, it's true. It's nice to finish a chapter and have that be the stopping point. Or if you feel like you got a little more in you, then read the next chapter. But when that one's super long, then I think for me, it dictates how I might continue reading. And I recall one of the last times I saw you was we were out watching one of the NFL playoff games, and you had gotten yourself into an article you really liked, but was super, super long, and it was taking you a bit of time to get through it.
Yes, I remember that article.
And I do think that you made a comment, or maybe it was someone else made a comment, that some of these articles that you really need a long form article to get something really fleshed out and be really well written. And I think that's one of the reasons why having a longer podcast can be worthwhile, because it takes some time to really get into a conversation and get to know somebody or whatever you're talking about. If it's really fast paced, let's get in, get out, then I don't know. Sometimes what can you learn in a short amount of time? So I think there's a lot of things to that. Yeah.
And sometimes you're taking time to find what you want to talk about and what's going to be interesting in a podcast. That especially this is a format that allows for things to kind of meander and take their time. And it's great if you have rapid fire questions and everything comes together, but sometimes the most interesting conversations are born out from smaller things that aren't that interesting at the start.
Yeah, and things that you don't even anticipate talking about. I do have a few thoughts in mind, usually entering a conversation, but I don't want to restrict myself to the things that I thought might be most interesting prior to sitting down with someone. I'd rather just let the conversation go where it goes, and if it feels good, then keep going. And if it, once I feel like maybe this is about all we can get out of it. But that's kind of, I think I learned that I've gone on a lot of first dates in my life, John.
Okay.
And you can kind of get a sense, can I just talk to this person, or do we really feel like we've run out of things to talk to? And that's a pretty good indication there's not going to be a second date if you've gotten to a first date and it's like, I don't know what else I can talk to this person about.
Well, I'm really excited that we're having our second date then.
Yes. So you've been invited back, second date with you, John. And I think there's probably a few thoughts running through our mind of things we can talk about, but one thing that we just spoke about before turning on the recording is this book that you urgently had to finish today because you didn't want too big of late fees at the library.
Yep. Yeah. It was due back a couple days ago, but I managed to finish it today. And it was a really good read the whole time. I've just been extremely busy, so I didn't get to read it as fast as I wanted to until today. I had a big chunk of time open and I knocked it out.
And what was this book, and what were some of the takeaways from it?
Well, it's called Utopia for Realists, and it's by a historian named Rutger Bregman, who has gone virally famous a couple of times recently. Once talking at the Davos event, which I wasn't super familiar with before this whole thing happened, but apparently it's where some of the richest folks in the world get together and talk about how they can solve problems through philanthropy. And he went there and told them that they should just pay more taxes. And that would help everyone to redistribute that wealth better. And, that for a certain segment of the population, redistribution of wealth or taxes, those are both just bad words. You can't say them. And I think in that room in front of all those billionaires, they weren't necessarily super excited about that idea either. But it went viral because there are so many people who do think that the people with the most money should probably pay more in taxes than they currently are worldwide. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. So I got his book. Since then, he was on some Fox News show, and then the thing didn't air because Tucker Carlson was the host, and it didn't go well. Tucker Carlson kind of melted down and started screaming obscenities at him.
Okay.
So they didn't air that. But this Rutger Bregman, he was in a studio in a different country, and he just had someone film it on the phone. So then he released it online on Twitter so everyone could see what had actually happened and why he wasn't on the Tucker Carlson show like he said it was going to be, because it was never released by the producers and whatnot. So anyway, his book, Utopia for Realists, covers a lot of different things about how we could make society better from his perspective as a historian. So a lot of times it's referencing all sorts of different studies or trends that have happened in the past and saying that these things have worked. Perhaps we should try them on a larger scale.
And I think sometimes in our busy day-to-day lives, we try to figure out all this stuff and try to figure out the best approach to whatever we're dealing with, whereas history usually has the answers, maybe not with everything every time, but a lot of what's happening now is just kind of the repeat of history, maybe in a slightly different way. And historians tend to have a pretty good idea of the best approach to things.
Historians do, experts in all sorts of fields. When you have an issue, a lot of times it's good to go to someone older and talk to them about what their experiences are on a individual level. That's why we go to our parents or our grandparents to ask about marital troubles or financial issues, or maybe you have a friend who works in an industry who knows about these things. I find that everyone knows more about something than I do. So I like to go to those people and ask them questions and help myself improve in certain areas. I don't know that I'm a super expert in any area, but I enjoy learning about lots of different areas.
I find that to be myself also. I've gained greater, wider, broader interest in so many things, but sometimes I don't feel like I know. I don't feel like I know anything, and maybe that's if there's any positive I can take from that, just understanding slightly the Dunning-Kruger effect, where maybe I'm smarter at things than I think I am, but just the idea that I feel like there's so much more to learn. I just kind of assume that I'm not that smart at anything. And that's where the opposite of that is people that really think they're smart at something and they don't really know anything about it. And I'm hoping I'm on the edge of that, where I'm smarter than I think I am instead of I think I'm smarter than I am.
Yeah, I think for most people, the more you learn about a subject, the more you realize how little you know about that subject. Now, if you really get in depth, you can become an expert in something. But I know that in just all sorts of minor things in life, trying to understand personal finance better, there's just so much I don't understand, and the world gets bigger and bigger, and the world of finance gets bigger and bigger than I knew the more I look into it. And now that I'm doing more adulting, I'm trying to figure out what to do with money I'm making now. Student loans are paid off and whatnot, and see what I can do for my future. And I know that's something that you're into, and you had what's the gentleman's name on that has a podcast as
on
well?
Episode 6 or 7 that was with Phil Ferguson.
Yep. And so I really enjoyed your guys' conversation in that instance. And in fact, I specifically sent that episode to a few people and told them that they should listen to it because I thought it might be good for them too.
Yeah, I've had some good comments on that episode in particular because he's a bit of an expert. If if I've had any experts on anything, he's one that definitely has been in the financial field for a long time and really can help someone. If you listen to him and hear what he has to say, you can kind of see through some of the people that are not experts, but try to pretend that they're experts in that field. And I at least that's been my perspective of him, which I found very helpful as I try to navigate the very difficult area of personal finance. You had mentioned this along that line, student loans, and you just paid off or recently have gotten out from under that for yourself as an individual. And I haven't had to deal with that. I was fortunate. I didn't get it's not the same as everyone gets free education, but my situation, my family situation at the time, with me getting some scholarships and a fair amount of financial aid and going to a school that wasn't nearly as expensive as maybe some other possibilities at the time, and working through college enough, I was able to, not too long after I finished graduating 13 years ago, not have any debt to my education.
And if I remember correctly, you also went to a technical college beforehand. So you got some of your credits done in a cheaper fashion there as well. So really, you had a combo of a lot of different things that helped out.
I went just 3 years at St. Cloud State. And as I got further into that, it became more expensive for me personally based on some of the financial things. But because I was able to finish, and I actually at that time, I took on an amount of credit card debt with a 0% loan to pay off the whatever final amounts. And I was able to pay that off before the 0% turned into whatever percent it was going to turn into.
That is a dangerous game for most people. I'm glad that it didn't turn that way for you.
I've always had success with that. But if you're not responsible enough to do that, I guess properly, then it'll crush you, I think, financially. So yeah, I'm fortunate where I feel like in many ways, my education was as near free as it could have been at that time. And I see people that are struggling with a situation that I did not have, and I wish they wouldn't have, and I wish our system would allow people just to learn, to get certified with their learning without getting into just this massive debt. But that's not where we're at, and it's something that's going to have to be addressed pretty soon, because I think it's maybe the next bubble to burst.
It does seem that way, and I know that there have been reports on people defaulting on their auto loans, which is often the first sign of a major economic collapse of some kind. And so I haven't gotten great details on that, but that's always kind of the canary in the coal mine, is the auto loans and people starting to fall behind on their payments for that.
It's weird, though, because it seems like economy is good for so many people and people are doing well, but I'd imagine that can't be true of it never is going to be true for everybody.
I think, there's a lot of people that are dealing with extreme medical debt and are unable to keep up with that. And that's why so many people are questioning the current healthcare system and the insurance system that we have in this country. I believe that, what's the GoFundMe website, the majority of what they do now is medical funding. So it's sort of like a voluntary tax that people are paying to help other people with their medical bills, which is very kind to see that from other people, but it also is maybe not the most efficient way to handle pooling our resources in order to help people with their medical bills. But other people would have other opinions about moving to a single payer or having a national healthcare system. There are downsides and upsides to everything. So,
yeah, I don't know the right answer on this. I just know that, okay, there has to be a better way. Other places in this world are doing it, what seems to be much better than we're doing that in the United States. I think we do carry some of the burden for the world, though. I think I've read and I've learned, because of our system on an individual basis for some of these medicines and medical procedures, the companies that are the manufacturers of whatever it is that we're consuming in this country in the medical scene, they kind of expect to get a lot of the money back through us because they can. And it makes it cheaper everywhere else. And that's why systems work better elsewhere, because they know they can get the bulk of their income from the United States.
And the United States has a fair amount of money. And I understand maybe paying a somewhat higher rate. But if people are going into bankruptcy over medical costs, that have nothing to do with themselves. You know, if you're an idiot and you do something stupid and hurt yourself, then I get that. But if you're just born with something that you had no control over, or something develops throughout your life that you have no control over, cancer being the easiest, most obvious example of that, that seems crazy to me that so many people have to take on such a burden when we could share it more equally. And because it is random, we don't know who's going to get it and who's not. So the world paying less, they could pay a little bit more, we could pay a little bit less. And I know, you know, from a military standpoint, that was kind of Trump's thing when he came in, saying that NATO should pay more, NATO members should pay more, and the U.S. is footing too much of the bill. And I do believe countries are moving up to match the GDP, because that's how it works. They don't match the dollar for dollar that the U.S. pays. We all pay based on our GDP, 2 or 3 or 4% of our total GDP.
More topics that I feel like I know a little bit about, but there's so much more to learn about. So what else has been weighing on your mind, John? I guess we haven't seen each other in a while.
I've just been real busy, and I think you have too. And I think that weighs on my mind, the busyness. That article that you mentioned I was reading during the football game was about millennial burnout, because rates of depression and stress are higher than they've ever been, which is odd because we have machines that are doing more than ever to help us accomplish the goals that we have. And in fact, American workers are much more productive than they have been in previous decades, but we're all still working tons of hours. And we've also seen a steady incline in jobs in this country ever since the collapse in 2008, but wages aren't going up. So a big part of the reason that there are more jobs being occupied is because so many people are working multiple jobs. And I know that both yourself and I work a second job. And I know that most of the people that I interact with have some kind of second job. And it might just be once a week. It might be every so often. It might be all the time. I was talking to a woman that I work with at my regular job, as I call it, my day job. And she was working almost full time at a kind of like fast food type restaurant. And then she was also going to school, but she was going to school one night a week. So he's like, oh, well, I'm going to finish school in 5 years. And I thought, my goodness, like that's a long time to wait to get that education, to get the job that you really want, because you're putting time into these 2 jobs to get by in the meantime. So it is a concern of mine that we're working as much as we are, and I can see that people don't feel like they have time to relax, and that's a shame.
It is. It's a realization I'm gaining more and more as when I decided to start this podcast. I knew it was going to be a commitment, a weekly amount of time to this project that's going to be ongoing and indefinite.
And this is a hobby. This isn't what I'm referring to when I talk about your second job. You already worked 2 jobs.
Yes, I already did. So yeah, this is just a hobby. It's something for me to try to see what I can learn from it and see if I can get great joy out of it. And there's been a lot of ways that I have. It's the fact that I've been able to go see some of these people that I've had on, spend time with them in a way that I hadn't in a while. I really am appreciating that and having that experience with them, and I want to keep doing that. But when I started it, I thought, well, maybe I have to cut back on work a little bit. And then I realized I don't want to. I want to cut back on work. I don't want to cut back on my income just to take on a new hobby. So I thought, can I maintain about the same level of income while doing this? And I have been, but it really takes more and more. It just, most of my time goes to all these things. And now as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, I don't want to proceed like this forever. What can I change? How can I change? And I don't know that I have the answers yet, but I don't want to make less money at this moment, but I do want to have more time, and I'm trying to figure out how can I do that? And there are a lot of ideas are coming to me, and some of them maybe could possibly work. But I think, the people aren't working second and third jobs because they want to. They feel like that brings their income to a level that they feel good about. But then, the lack of the free time on the back end of that really can get kind of scary, I think.
I think that for you and for a lot of folks out there, if they have this opportunity, the easiest answer is to make more money. And that sounds easy. and it's harder than it sounds.
Like make more money per hour.
Find a new job. Yeah.
Yes.
Get a better job and you'll make more money. But when you're working 2 jobs and putting in the time on your hobby, you feel too exhausted to look for that better job. Or maybe you have circumstances within your particular job that you don't want to give up. But that is always the most obvious way and the most ignored way by people when they don't feel like they have enough money is they're not out there searching for a better job.
Yep.
So that's something I've been trying to work on myself, is reminding myself of that. The other thing that is separate but ties into some of the things you were getting to is I really enjoy my second job. I have a fun second job, and we talked about how we met back in the day when we did our podcast the first time, and it was through sports broadcasting at St. Cloud State doing radio sports play-by-play, and that is still what I do for my second job. I tried to do it as a career for 12 years. I was roller coaster up and down successful along the way in terms of providing for myself and setting myself up for the future. Eventually, I didn't feel like I could continue to be super efficient at making money in it. So I went to a day job, but I still do it at night, and I call a couple games a week typically. And I think for most people, they look at that and they think, wow, I like sports. That would be so much fun. It is fun. But when you work 40 hours a week and then you do 2 to 4, there were times where I was doing 6 nights a week of this sort of thing. So whether it be prepping for a game at night or calling a game at night, it was all night or every night. And then you don't have any relaxation time. And so I think that this podcast, although you enjoy it, can fall into that category at times where I like doing it, but man, I would like a break this week or something along those lines.
Yeah. And I think I can get better at getting ahead a little bit. I think in all aspects of life, something that we can do is we can like keep pace or we can get ahead, because once you get ahead, and that's kind of why I work so much, because I feel like if I make a little more money than I need right now, at some point I'll be ahead and then I can enjoy some of these other things. So I can, like, a reason that we're recording this right now is I've got a vacation coming up soon, as do you, and I'm able to then not worry about the podcast as much for a little bit of time and enjoy my vacation. But in those moments, it seems like the moments leading up to vacation and then coming out of it, there's always so much to do, which kind of maybe takes away from some of the enjoyment. But that's just kind of the way life is, I guess.
When you're working 60 plus hours a week and you get a week off and you get to travel more than others because you've structured your work life like that.
Yes.
But for myself, at my main job, there's 2 weeks a year. That's the vacation, 10 total days that I get vacation for. And you want to squeeze adventure into that, or at least I do. I want to go places. I want to do things, but that leaves less time for relaxation sometimes, because going to a city and traveling and going around and seeing the sights and doing those things is not always relaxing. It's fun for me, but it isn't always relaxing. And so that's another thing where I look at what we're doing in our country and what some other countries are doing with the amount of leisure time that they have, because we are far more productive than we've ever been before. Machines have helped us be that way. Education has helped us be that way, because we are the most educated that we've ever been in this country. More and more kids finishing high school, more and more kids going to college. And that's good for our society as a whole. And yet we aren't reaping the benefits of more relaxation time. And there are some countries where major industries are moving towards 4-day work weeks. And I don't mean 4/10s, like I'm sure other people out there work in this country. I just mean 4 days. They only, they do a 32-hour work week, and that's a full-time job there. And it would be nice if we got to that point, but we are kind of work obsessed in this country. It's the first thing we ask about someone when we meet them. It seems to be the thing that we take the most pride in, and we put the most pressure on ourselves in. And it determines how much money that we make. And that determines what kind of life we live to a large part in this country, because we tie that together.
I think that's one of the things that people in this country maybe fail to realize unless you've traveled to other countries. I remember on my Australia trip, which was about a year ago, being there, and it was a 2-week vacation, a little more than 2 weeks I was gone, which in this country, that's not a lot of people can do that. I guess I feel fortunate that I was able to structure my life and do that and financially and work schedules kind of make that work okay. Then I get there, and we were staying in hostels quite a bit, where usually it's a younger group of people, and would talk to some people, a lot of Europeans especially, where we'd say 2 weeks, and they'd just be dumbfounded at how short of a time that you come all the way here for 2 weeks, when they're maybe doing a 3-month type of thing, because it's structured into most of those European countries at that younger age that you're able, and suggested that you should go travel, go do things, take the time to learn about yourself, enjoy your life,
and learn about the world and other people.
And that's what's so common about those people. And in this country, it's just not what most people do. It's unheard of because it's not a part of the culture. And even a few months ago, I stayed at another hostel when I was in San Francisco, and I ran into a lot of Europeans there. It's the same type of thing. Like at that time, it's easier traveling within your own country and not go for that long. But some of these people were really going on long adventures. There's a guy from Australia that I met there, James, that he was in the United States for maybe a month. A gal from Europe that she was doing like a 2 or 3 month thing, just traveling, seeing all these different people that she had met before. And both of those people, I imagine I'll see them again. In fact, I did see James later on in that trip. He was in Austin, Texas when I went there. And it was just cool to see these people going and doing these things and traveling and touring and being able to structure their lives that way. But this country, we don't do that. And I want more people, even if we don't do it as a country, more people that try to find a way to do it, because I find great joy in that. But then again, I'm working so hard in the meantime so I can do it again the next time.
Yep. There's a comedian here in America named Hannibal Buress, and he went to Australia, and he has a bit that is very funny that's about exactly what you're talking about. He was going to an aquarium in Australia, and there was a photographer, just like an aquarium photographer, walking around taking pictures of people so you could buy the photo or whatever. And the photographer heard his accent and said, "Oh, you're American. I'm going to America on vacation. I'm really excited about it." And he said, "I'm going to LA and to Vegas and to Denver. And then I'm going to Austin and I'm going to New York and I'm going to Miami." And he just keeps listing off cities that he's going to on his vacation. And Hannibal Buress is like, "What? You work here and you get to go, you take pictures at the aquarium and you get to go to all those places on vacation? If you worked at an aquarium in America, your vacation would be to the aquarium. That's the only place that you could afford to go." And it's funny, but it's sad and it's true that all of these other countries that are, on either a level playing field with us or not as efficient and GDP great as us, or whatever you want to measure us by, they have all these things for their average citizens, and in this country that is still reserved only for the richest citizens. And people have a great fear of taxes in this country, and that's kind of what leads to that disparity in people living their regular lives, is the hope that in this country someday you'll be rich, so you don't want to tax people because you think that you're going to get there someday, when almost none of us will.
The big reason that I don't go on more 2-week vacations or go on a month vacation at this point, the reason I tell myself is it'll mess up my health insurance. And because it's through your employer. Through my employer, and I need to keep a certain amount of hours there to maintain it, and I don't want to lose it. I don't want to go to a more expensive, worse health insurance plan, which is what I'd have to do if I didn't keep it through my employer. And I somehow, even though maybe it'd be worth it in some ways for more time and freedom, it would cost more money and it'd be worse health insurance. And I'm very hesitant. I mean, maybe at some point that'll happen, but I'm trying to not let that happen. But if I was covered by a healthcare system that was available to everyone and affordable, or just automatic through our government, which I guess I think the Obamacare thing would be more expensive for me also. Regardless, I would feel that freedom that these other countries have, because I think in most of these cases, they don't have to worry about their health insurance. That may not be for every country, and maybe some of these people are taking a bigger risk by like not being on some sort of health insurance. I can't say for certain, but that, to me, that's the big burden of I can't get away for very long because I want to keep my health insurance. Yeah, and everyone's dealing with a different burden. Some people
don't have the vacation time, or they're dealing with an illness, or they have kids, so they have to use their vacation time to go to the doctor or to take care of their kids. I know I work with folks who have been out of work a lot over the last month because of the snow that we've had here in Minnesota. There have been so many snow days, more snow days this month than I'm sure you or I had in our entire school lives, which I'm not going to be that old guy saying, oh, I can't believe these kids never have to go to school. I think it's great that we use the predictive technology we have to know, oh, it's going to snow a foot between now and tomorrow. Maybe we should not force buses onto the road and force children to stand out in negative 26 degrees or whatever it is. Let's use that. Great. But it has put a burden on the parents because they then have to skip work most of the time if the kids are young enough to stay home with a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old who would normally be at school throughout the day.
Yeah, I think I saw one school district was going to cut into their spring break a little bit to do that, which isn't unreasonable, but sometimes people make plans on these long planned out off days that you're now going to have to mess with that, which, that's not the worst thing in the world. I'm sure people can work around it. But we lack flexibility in this country because of how important work is to us. And it's become more important because we are not making as much, or we haven't increased with the times the way that other places have, or the way that we could have, because real wages compared, if you compare what a $7 an hour job 50 years ago was worth compared to $50 an hour job now, I'm just throwing out random numbers here. I don't know if that correlates at all, but they're not even, the $7 job back in the past is worth far more than what the equivalent work is done today. And I remember doing this even with my mother when I was trying to explain to her, because she said, well, I made only this much at my first job. And I was like, okay, well, 90 cents an hour in 1972 or whatever it was equates to $6.50 an hour now. Do you think that should be the minimum wage, $6.50 right now? Or do you think that's not enough to survive on? And if you do the math, it's not a lot of money by the end of the year. And that is probably a job that doesn't have health insurance or doesn't have good health insurance. And so it would be nice if we could continue to get people closer to a living wage. But there's a lot of impediments to that. And a lot of them are mental. But people proposing wild ideas moves the meter, right? That people think, oh, well, that's crazy. We could never do that. But we could move it this much. Maybe that's more reasonable. And then that helps people. So I know that there have been some far-reaching younger left folks making national news on a regular basis now, following in the steps of Bernie Sanders' last campaign. And I think they are moving the conversation to the left, whereas we had been moving towards a conservative right for a long time when it came to financial matters. Yeah, I think what we're going to see more, and I hope we see more, is more younger people get involved and have a bigger presence in the political process. As I think you do give up some wisdom potentially there with people that have been at it for a long time. Though you see that why necessarily, and I'm about to turn 36. You're what now? 34, 35? 34. There's the people that are twice our age making the decisions that are going to impact people half our age, like greatly, and people that haven't been born yet. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, maybe they should know better about some things, but shouldn't the people that are going to have to deal with it be given a little more weight in the decision-making process? I think that would be ideal.
Would you, have you heard this joke? Would you let someone pick the movie you're going to watch if they're going to leave in 10 minutes?
No.
Yeah, so that's...
Well, I'd let you because you know your movies, but no one else.
But you know what I mean,
yes.
Right? You have to sit there through the rest of it, so you'd like to watch something that you would enjoy and not necessarily something that others would feel like the first few minutes are good and then they're out. So that's one way to look at it. I do think that younger people are becoming more involved, and I think it is because of the approach some of the more social media savvy folks that have gotten into politics since the last election, and I see it on both the left and the right, the social media presence, like C-SPAN is being retweeted and stuff like that. I'm seeing that a lot and I follow a lot of people politically on Twitter, so that's part of the reason I'm seeing it, and part of the reason I brought it up casually, like, oh, everyone knows about this viral guy from Davos who spoke to the billionaires, right? And maybe a lot of people don't. It's an interesting video, so maybe you should track it down. But
I'll plan and track it down and put it in the show notes so people can watch it if they want to, make it easier.
So I don't remember seeing a lot of C-SPAN being retweeted in just a few years ago. And I think, is it Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She did something, spoke to someone, and it became like one of the most retweeted things that's ever been. And that's crazy to me, because people are paying attention to politics in a way that they hadn't in the past, which, whether you're left or right, people paying attention and being educated, that's positive for everyone.
And I think this is going to relate to my next thought too, that the fact that there are these relatively younger people emerging as national political figures is certainly a force driven by social media, whether it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or the Beto O'Rourke, who had a good push from the Democratic side in Texas, in a state that doesn't really vote that way usually. And I think there's plenty of names on both sides of the political spectrum. But I relate that to, I was having a conversation with someone recently, how it seemed to be, and maybe this is not correct, and you certainly can correct me if you know anything different, but throughout history, people that had the power and the wealth just kind of kept it for a long, long time. And that's not necessarily different now, except because of technology's ability to make someone who didn't have much or wasn't very powerful suddenly either very wealthy through inventing something that can really take off very quickly, or through, I guess, social media in some other way. The fact that you don't need to come from a great wealthy background to suddenly be famous or popular or have some power in some way, that I think it's going to it's going to change things in some way. The same people with all the power won't necessarily be able to keep it the way they used to.
I think that right now we're in a situation where we might end up with just different people, but still small groups getting it. In the book that I talked about earlier that I just finished reading, they talked about how Kodak was, this massive company dealing with photography, and then they went bankrupt. And around the same time that they went bankrupt, Instagram sold for $1 billion. Right? So Instagram was a company that was run by like 13 people.
Yep. And
you had hundreds of thousands of people working for Kodak. So, well, companies, they rise and they fall, and that happens. And we know that in a market economy like we have in a capitalist society. But is it better that the hundreds of thousands of people were employed, making money, some of them a lot, some of them less, and, all of them surviving, than 13 people or whatever the number actually was getting all of the money? So, I mean, those companies essentially traded places in the marketplace in that situation, in a very condensed view of things. So, yes, there are opportunities for people to use the internet to their favor and to use programming to their favor and other things to create businesses. But do those businesses then result in lots of employees? And Instagram has more employees than they used to. It's not like they're still running on that many. But it's amazing that smaller group can create that much wealth for themselves on the venture capitalism that we have in this country, and creating a value on the stock market for themselves.
To me, that's an example of something else, as well as what you stated, that Kodak, and I've heard that them discussed in a few other books and other areas as well, of a company that just kept doing the same thing. They were good at what they did and just thought that was going to work forever, apparently. And clearly at some point it stopped working. But that's not the best survival tactic. Maybe in some cases you can keep doing what you're doing and it'll be fine. But if you just stick to your current ways, to old beliefs, and just expect that to be something that's going to carry you into the future, there's a fairly great risk that you're going to be proven wrong, and then you're going to have something really bad to deal with. So the 100,000 people that work for Kodak that attached themselves to this company and eventually lost their job, apparently, that's no good. But that's a lesson that we can all learn from, that if you attach yourself to a dinosaur or a dinosaur-like idea and expect it to survive forever, you might be up for a rude awakening sometimes. So you kind of always be thinking ahead And I guess the term is progressively just try to see what's going to be next. How can I stay ahead? How can I make sure that I'm okay long term? And I think in some cases, people really attach themselves to either bad ideas or old ideas that turn into bad ideas.
Well, we also have to remember how different the workplace is and workplace culture is in our generation versus past generations. So let's take a company. It could be Kodak, could be anyone. 30 years ago, it wouldn't be uncommon at all to think, I'm going to work at this job for my entire life. Because after 5 years, I get an extra week of vacation. After 10 years, I get another week of vacation. I have stock in this company. So you're invested in the company and they're invested in you, right? They've trained you and they keep you. And that was how things worked. It is very different now in that most young people expect to have many jobs at different companies and move along. So when I hear you say, oh yeah, just leave because you think it might be a bad situation, that sounds good. But as we talked about, sometimes you're busy and finding a new job is harder than it sounds. And also, if you are working a job where you have doubled your salary and you have all these great benefits, but if you leave the company, you will end up at a new company basically at the bottom rung again, and you've got to start all over. I work with people in my department at my job that are in that situation. They've been there for 30 or 40 years. They know that if they go to some other place, they're going to have to start at the beginning and be making whatever the starting wage is. And they're going to go back to having 1 week of vacation. They can't leave that job. If the company that I worked for went out of business, their lives would change drastically because they would not be able to move to some other company. Their skills have kind of eroded in terms of learning new things and whatnot because they've been doing the same thing for so long. And the way that people change or businesses change and processes change is fast now. So you have to be able to keep up with that if you want to have success at a new company.
So on that thought though, John, I'm not suggesting that people should just, leave their job out of fear that maybe someday it won't be there. But I think you always got to be thinking ahead. And I'm not saying people don't think ahead, but I'd imagine some people don't recognize the risk of being too stable and too comfortable, because at some point things are going to change, whether you can see it coming or not. There's things are never stable in this world. Sure. It seems like. And I like to do that. I like to work ahead. I know it's best for me to have more now than I need for the day that I need what I've built, and then I can survive for a while and figure out the next thing. And it's maybe easier said than done. Everyone's not in the great position to do that at all times. But I think there's a kind of a survivor mentality. Absolutely. Of just having enough to stay afloat, which I think sometimes that's all people can do. But at a certain point, if you can do more to actually get ahead, then you can survive better the next time that comes around.
And I think our generation, and you and I very specifically, because we came out of college at around the time of the last financial collapse, we are in a group that has proven that we are concerned about that, and we have more money saved at this point in our lives than the previous generation did, because we are worried and we're expecting another collapse soon, and we don't know what's going to happen then. But to come out of school with a fair amount of student loan debt and be in a terrible economy and jobs were rough, it's programmed us to be a little more careful in the similar, but not the more extreme way that people living in the Great Depression, if you've ever been around some of those folks, they don't let food go to waste. They are very careful. They wear clothes for a lot longer. Those sorts of things factor in. And I know for you, it's saving up a little extra money, right? Oh, I'll have this extra money if there's a situation. For me, I'm more of an MRE, stockpiling guns. I've got all that in the basement just in case there's an emergency. So that way I know that I'll be taken care of.
This is news to me, John.
I don't have a basement, but everyone approaches the things differently.
You're right.
And so some people are worried about certain things and some people are worried about very different things, but a lot of people are trying to prepare. However, losing your job in short notice like that turns your whole world on its head.
I'd imagine it would. Yeah. I'm not looking forward to that day, but then again, I think I'll learn a lot about myself if that day ever should come and I have to kind of fight through that. John, I think it's about time to move to the end of this episode. And we've done this once before, on my Being Wrong segment. Last time you talked about paper and plastic. We have an update on the paper-plastic debate first.
No, you got to go watch that TED Talk on your own.
Okay.
It's plastic, probably. As long as you reuse it responsibly, then it should be plastic, or you dispose of it responsibly.
And that was episode 4, if someone hasn't heard it and wants to listen back to John's previous Being Wrong thoughts. But what about now?
Did you find the TED Talk and attach it to that? I can't remember.
No, I don't think I knew about it that time.
Okay. It's out there somewhere. Something else. So every time I come on, I got to think of more things that I'm wrong about.
Yes.
Apparently.
I'm sure you have them. I'm sure you just got to think about yourself.
But I just feel like when listening to other people, they have had some really heavy things that they've been wrong about. And I did a little bit about paper and plastic. I feel the same way now, in that I might just talk about something that's going on recently in my life that I was wrong about, that really isn't that consequential to me or to anyone. But the Oscars were just on the other day, and that's something that I watch every year and I really enjoy. I try to watch as many of the movies, certainly all the Best Picture nominations as I can. And then we had people over to watch, and we all filled out, our picks and to see who would do the best. And I saw a ton of movies, more than most people that were at the party for sure. And I did not come close to taking the top prize for having the most right. So one, I was wrong about that, but I was wrong in my approach to the whole thing because of the way that the Academy has been changing. And I learned recently that over the last few years, they've made a bigger push to diversify both culturally, racially, gender-wise, in terms of who's doing the voting on that. And so it seems like it's becoming a little harder to predict because it was fairly easy to know what a bunch of old white guys were going to say, because that's who did most of the voting in the past, what they were going to be into and what types of movies they liked. And this year, I think almost every picture that was nominated for Best Picture won some kind of award, some more minor award. And I would not have guessed that the one that won the top prize was the best movie of the year in the minds of the Academy. So I think it makes for a more interesting show in that regard. Although I know that that's a polarizing topic as well. Somehow politics has gotten really into the Oscars. Some people like to not watch it in protest of the liberal elite that are in Hollywood, I suppose. I just like movies. So I'm not really concerned with who's at the awards. I like the Oscars because it encourages me to go see movies that aren't just about explosions and spaceships, as much as I love superheroes and Star Wars and whatnot. A lot of the movies this year made you think or looked at society from a different angle than maybe you do normally. Or presented important issues. And I'm glad I saw them.
You say you were wrong about that. Were you very super confident in your picks? I feel pretty good about this, or were you not?
I was less confident than I've been in years past, but I felt good because I had seen so many. So I thought I'm going to do pretty well because I saw a lot of movies, and there are going to be a bunch of people here who didn't make time for that. That's one thing that I really forced into my schedule over the last month or so, was seeing movies. And there were other people there that knew movies quite well and saw a fair amount of them. So I thought I would be in contention with them. And if I'd lost to them by 1 or 2 points, I probably wouldn't have been as disappointed. But I think I only got 11 right, and the top prize winner got 17 right. So they're only 20-ish, low 20s categories. So to get maybe less than half of them right was a surprise to me.
And you say this, and I don't disagree that this wasn't it was a inconsequential type of being wrong thing. But I think any time that we experience something where we feel like we know something and suddenly we're shocked about how little maybe we know, I think it's a very healthy thing to go through sometimes, just because it's so easy to think that we know more than we know.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I was humbled a little bit that night because my last being wrong was just a shocker or surprise to me. And I was like, oh, I feel like I learned something. That's good. And this time I felt like I was a little bit educated on the subject, and I had taken the time to do some research, and yet I was off base with how things were going. However, these are subjective awards. This is not, these are not hard facts that I was wrong about. So it's not something that I'm losing sleep over.
In conversation recently, just the other day, I made a statement that was something to the effect of, none of us know anything some of us are just more convinced that we know something.
Okay.
Which I guess kind of relates to all this. That, I mean, I don't know what truths there are, but I know some people are pretty certain about certain truths. And that's something that through this podcast and through the help of people like you, just me trying to figure out what we actually know and what other people think they actually know and what has humbled them from when they realize they don't know this anymore. And I think I just find it to be a great exploration of the mind.
Yeah, I enjoy coming on the show, but it's really not any different than most of the times that you and I get together. We just talk about what's going on and what we've learned and what we're going through. And so I appreciate you allowing me to come on, because I didn't, have some special perspective today, like you usually try to find with these guests and find the most interesting thing. You already talked to me about things that you thought were particularly interesting in the last time I was on, but I'll always come on if you need someone to join you for a chat.
Well, we'll probably do it again, John. Thank you again, and I guess I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to People I Know Show. Links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook and Instagram accounts. Also there, you'll find a link to the video that John referenced regarding an unaired interview from Fox News with host Tucker Carlson and guest author Rutger Bregman. Please take a few moments to rate and review People I Know Show on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you might be listening. And if you like the show, please encourage someone new to listen to this episode, or you can maybe share this episode or a different episode on social media. That helps a lot and would be greatly appreciated. And as always, feel free to email your feedback directly to me, Curt Carstensen, by using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.